Hello everyone! In this video we are going to take a look at the amazing canvas group node. With this we are going to be able to make a mask for our nodes and also to create borders or to apply effects to all of the nodes at once. So without further ado, let us get started. Okay, now the first thing that I want to show you is the main difference between some nodes that are simply under a node 2D and nodes that are under a canvas group. You see, what a canvas group does is to treat all of its children as if they were drawn at the same time. Now, what does that even mean to us? Well, let's see an example. If I go to our simple icons that are sitting under a node 2D, what I can do is to make them more transparent by modifying the modulate here and reducing the transparency. Now, as you can see, these icons kind of blend together at the point in which they intersect. Now, if I were to go to the canvas group and apply the modulate as well, the same thing will happen. However, another thing that we can do here with the canvas group is to apply the self-modulate. And this self-modulate is going to take the whole thing that's been drawn here and make it more transparent as a singular object. So if I were to reduce now the opacity here, you see that they no longer blend here in the middle and they are simply more transparent as a whole. Okay, but this is obviously not everything, because another side effect of the canvas group being drawn as a whole thing is how the icons blend together. So, for example, if I were to take this icon and add to it a material that's a new canvas item material, you see here I have a blending mode that can be mix, add, subtract or multiply. Now let's do the same thing to this other icon and then let's see the differences between them. Okay, now let us go to the first icon and change its blending mode to add. You'll see that the additive blending mode is going to be applied on both the sprites and the background. However, if we take this icon that's sitting in the canvas group, you'll see that if we add, this additive blending mode is going to be applied only here at the intersection of our elements. Okay, but let's check out the other blending modes. If I go again to my first icon, I can change to the subtract blending mode and you will see that everything pretty much starts to go darker. This happens both to the sprites and to the background. Now, if I go to this one, which is under the canvas group, you'll see a very interesting effect. Because these things have been drawn at the same time, there's pretty much nothing to subtract from. So if I click subtract, you'll see that I have basically created a mask or a hole that's in my icons here. And I can prove that it's a hole by simply dragging this and putting over the other things. And you can see that we can perfectly see through this. Okay, now let's also check out the multiply blending mode. You'll see that this multiplies with everything, but in our icon here, I can multiply and it only multiplies with whatever is here. And since here is nothing, it's not going to multiply with anything and it's going to stay like that. Now we know that the canvas group is drawing everything at the same time. We might ask ourselves, can we also use a shader that applies at the same time on everything? Well, yes, we can, but we have to do a few things. So if I were to simply just add the shader, you would see that everything basically vanishes and turns into a white square. Now this is happening because behind the scenes, our canvas group was applying a shader. Now, since we created a new shader, we have basically overridden that previous shader. So, to add the functionality back, what we are going to do is to, first of all, create a new shader. Let's call it canvas layers, why not? And if I open this, I'm going to take a look in the documentation and take precisely the shader that's doing whatever the canvas group was doing. So I just copied the shader and I'm pasting it here. And as you can see, just as we kept saying, what this shader does is to take the screen texture. So it's taking whatever has been drawn as a whole and then it's setting it as a color. And don't worry too much about this. This is just some trick to reverse the pre-multiplied alpha that's been applied on the texture, but it's really not important for our case. Okay, so what now? Well, we could take any shader that uses this texture and modify the texture however we want. So for example, let's add a border shader. I copied and pasted it so that we don't lose too much time, but basically what this shader does is to add two parameters, align color and align thickness, and it's adding some directions in which we can look in order to see if we are at the border or not. So you see these directions are -1, 0, which means to the left. I hope this is the left in the camera. 0, -1, which is in the opposite direction, and so on and so forth. So in our fragment shader, we can define the size of our border and we can calculate the outline. And to calculate the outline, we are basically always looking all around our pixel by going through all these offsets. We collect a sum of all the transparencies and we pick the minimum of that sum and 1. And why do we do that? Well, you see, because after we do whatever we had to do for our canvas group shader, so this is the code that we had before, we are now going to set the color to be a mix between the actual color and the border. But what is going to be the decisive function that tells us that, okay, it's either color or it's the border? Well, the mix function works this way. If this value is 0, we are going to pick the color. If this value is 1, then we are going to pick the line color, which is basically the border. And if it's anything in between, then we are going to interpolate between those values. Okay, but let's not worry too much about the shader. Let's just see it in action, because it's definitely not the best shader out there. But if we take a look here, we can actually notice this black border, but maybe to notice it better, we can make it white, and you see that we already have a border here. Now, if I want, I can increase the line thickness, and you see that I'm making a bigger border. But what's the nice thing is that this border is around our canvas group. And that means that I could be moving everything in my canvas group and you would see that I still have a continuous border. Or maybe I could even separate things and I have a border around this one and a border around this one. And that's honestly a very, very nice feature. Now, sometimes you might stumble upon a shader that is going to expand way more. And in those cases, you should pay attention to the canvas group margin size. Because, for example, now, if I were to increase this shader to more than 10 pixels, you would see that I would hit some kind of invisible barrier here. And this is because our margins are only being 10 pixels. If I increase the margin of the canvas group, you'll see that I can now see again my borders. Okay, and also I told you to not worry too much about the shader because it's a bit buggy. You'll see that if I zoom out too much, these things that we've drawn in all directions are going to get rendered all around my canvas group. Okay, but that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot for watching, thanks to my Ko-fi supporter, and see you in the next one. Bye!